these oil filters apart, and I might ask, why am I doing that? Well, a couple reasons. One, you really don't know the condition of your engine, the interior condition of your engine, and a good way to tell how your bearings are doing and if there's any metal particulate floating around in there is you cut open the oil filter. Another reason is no matter how long you leave it upside down and let it drain, you're never going to get all the oil out of it. I had some of these oil filters have been sitting around for over a year, and cut them open and there's still, you know, a good cup or two of oil in it, depending on the oil filter size, of course. You know, these smaller ones, there might be a half a cup of oil in there, but and then the third reason is I'm going to weld these together and use them to store things. Like could store anything in them. Store nuts and bolts. What I'm going to do is use them to store like these bigger ones. I could store you know, my torch in there, or my torches in there, or I could store the smaller ones. I could store these paint spray cans in. The bigger one is probably, it'll work, but, or you know, the brake fluid container would probably fit in here, something like that. Or you could even make cup holders out of them. They're perfectly round, and as long as you cut them and you don't put too much strain on them when you're cutting them, they're perfectly round. So the cutter I have, I got this off of eBay. It's Elite Billet, made in the USA. Couldn't tell you how much I paid for it. I bought this a few years ago. But anyways, it's on the principle of cutting. It's like a tubing cutter. So this peg here sits in the middle of your oil filter, and then you just slowly tighten it, and then you just drag it around and continue to turn it like a quarter turn or an eighth of a turn until it cuts all the way through. You'll have a perfect cut. And I've seen guys use like a cutoff wheel to cut these open, and while it works, and I've seen people use a utility knife too, but this is like simple, easy, and not only that, like, you're not putting metal inside there, which will give you a false reading, because what you're looking for is metal. So this is a pretty heavy ring that attaches to your engine block to have the seal here. And then here you have an oil filter, and you can see this has been sitting for over a year. I'm spilling oil on my floor. It's been sitting over a year and it's still full of, still has a bunch of oil in it. See that? So I'm not going to pull a measuring cup out of my wife's kitchen drawer to measure it, but basically the serrated edge here, it's as full as that right now. So now if you think about that and how many oil filters you throw out in a year or whatever, you're polluting your environment, so you can get more oil out of it. Plus you're inspecting the engine, the oil in the engine, to see if you're getting excessive wear. Now, you know, older guys and I don't like to lump myself into that category because I still feel like I'm a young guy. But I went to auto mechanics in 1997 in high school. Took auto mechanics in 97 in high school, and my shop teacher recommended that you always follow the manufacturer's recommended specifications for changing your engine oil. Now back then, the manufacturer's recommended specification was 3,000 miles. A lot of mechanics, at least back then, would change their oil 1,000 miles prior to the manufacturer's recommended specifications because you would have less dirt in circulating in your oil. Now they're like, well, but that's the purpose of the filter. That's to clean it out, and so you don't have dirt floating around in your oil. Well, you can check Uncle Tony's video when he cuts an oil filter open and explains how they work. But there's a bypass valve. I don't want to get oil all over my floor again. Let me see. There's a bypass valve in your oil filter here. See? I don't know if you can hear it, but it's made to bypass the filter altogether when you have a certain pressure, oil pressure going through it. So when does it happen? Well, I can't tell you for certain, but it's basically off idle, high RPM or mid RPM range, something along those lines. So the only time it's really filtering is when it's idling or it's at low RPM. And of course the style of filter, brand, whatever, that might all change. I'm not an expert on that. Like I said, go watch Uncle Tony's garage and he'll explain it further. So the problem with today's vehicles is, like, we have a 2020 Challenger. Now the manufacturer's recommended oil change interval is much higher. I don't even know, I haven't read the book, but it has an indicator on the dash which tells you the life of the oil and when you should change it. Now I can tell you this, it is much higher than 3,000 miles. And the issue I have with that is, even if you're running synthetic, you're still circulating a lot of dirt through there. Now, why would the manufacturer recommend such a high interval? Well, let's face it, manufacturers do not want their cars to last forever. Their optimal lifespan of a vehicle is just past the warranty date. So if you have a vehicle that's warranted for 100,000 miles, that vehicle is meant to last 100,000 miles and that's it. So they really don't care if your engine lasts much further than that. And it's not to their benefit, because then they can't, that's less cars they can sell, less drivetrains, yada yada. And the only reason I say drivetrains is because a lot of them are in the market of selling, you know, bolt-in drivetrains, such as like Dodge with the Elephant and so forth. So I'm not going to tell you what your recommended interval should be for these newer vehicles. That's up to you. But I would suggest, and what I do, I have that 05 Ram, and I've changed that religiously at 3,000 miles. Now, there's been a couple times where it went 4,000 or 5,000 miles, and that was when I was broke and I couldn't afford to change the oil because I use synthetic. I've always used synthetic in that 5.7 Hemi. And I haven't had any issues with the engine. The internals of the engine, I haven't had any camshaft lifter problems. And it's at 200,000 miles right now. It did have a ticking noise, which was related to the exhaust manifolds leaking, and I replaced those this this spring. I replaced them, and now the sound is gone and it runs beautiful. So what I would recommend is get one of these and start experimenting. You know, just cut it apart at 3,000, cut it apart at 4,000, 5,000, and so on, and just see the difference. Now, I cut apart several of these this morning. I cut apart several of these this morning, and there's definitely, you could tell the ones that were in the vehicle longer than they should have been, because there's actually like, and these aren't from my Dodge, these are from other vehicles, but you can definitely tell there's more particulate in there, and that suggests to me that it's higher mileage, higher miles on the oil change. There are manufacturers, probably oil manufacturers, that recommend that you can keep your oil in the engine past 3,000 miles and just change your filter every 3,000 miles. Now, that would be a good thought, but then again, you have the issue where you have the bypass in the filter. So really, you're not getting that particulate out if you're running 2,000, 3,000, or so on. You know, I'm sure I'll be corrected by the experts online, but there's a certain point where that bypass valve opens up and it's no longer filtering, it's just pumping the oil through the engine. Why does it do that? Well, it does that because at higher RPM there's more demand for lubrication. So that's built in there, so that way the engine isn't starved of oil and then it starts eating bearings and everything else. So what I would do, like I said, is experiment and see what you come up with. And I would definitely recommend, if you can't afford to change synthetic oil every 3,000 miles, I get it. Oil's ridiculous now, it's expensive. Go with the cheaper stuff. You know, use the diesel oil, or you know, you can go to your like your local Farm and Fleet, or Rural King if you have it, and they have their oil is cheaper typically than, you know, your big box stores, you know, like O'Reilly's and all that. And I used to buy oil from O'Reilly's all the time, but it's gotten pretty high. So I try to shop around and find it cheaper in other places. So that's it, you know. Not really too exciting in this video, but I wanted to at least put up some content, and this isn't really filler. I mean, I think it's kind of an important issue, important topic to talk about, because, you know, I've seen like newer vehicles that are, at least, well, to me, anything over 2005 is new, because that's my newest vehicle. My wife's car is a 2020, and as much as we love it, I kind of shy away from vehicles that I'm not comfortable working on, you know. So I stick around 2005 or older, personally. But yeah, seeing any vehicle that's newer within the last 10 or 15 years even, smoking, you know, rolling down the road and smoke coming out the tailpipe, or just having like heavy engine, like ticking, you know, like just, you know, like the engine has just had a really rough life, and I guarantee that's a big part of that is the oil changes. So do yourself a favor and change your oil and your filter before your manufacturer recommended interval, and I can almost guarantee you're going to have a longer life out of your car and your engine. So that's all for this video. I'm sure it's gone on way too long, and I will come back or make another video of, you know, the stuff I make out of these oil filter housings.